The barn smelled like rot and forgotten promises. I stood in the doorway at dawn, breath fogging in February cold, and felt the weight of my tool belt like an accusation. 4 months since I'd worn it. 4 months since I'd trusted my hands to build anything that mattered. My right hand trembled when I reached for the doorframe. Just a small shake, a tick most people wouldn't notice. But I felt it travel up my arm and lodge somewhere behind my ribs where the smoke still lived. The Cascade fire had taken 3 of my crew. It had taken my career. Some days it felt like it had taken my ability to breathe without counting the exits. I hadn't held a saw since June, hadn't driven a nail, hadn't trusted myself with anything sharper than a butter knife around my daughter. But the bank account didn't care about trauma. Mara needed soccer cleats and school supplies. The landlord wanted rent. And this barn job was the only offer I'd gotten in 2 months of searching. I pressed my palm flat against the weathered wood. The grain was rough, honest. Wood doesn't lie about its age or its damage. It just shows you what it is. My hand steadied. Small victory, I'd take it. You must be Hayes. I turned. A man stood in the gravel drive beside a silver Audi that looked like it had never seen a dirt road. He wore pressed khakis and a linen shirt the color of champagne, and he carried a leather-bound clipboard like it was a holy text. Everything about him said city money. Everything about this barn said rural desperation. Hayes Caldwell, I said, walking toward him. I wiped my palm on my jeans before extending it. Old habit. You're the client? Ethan Cross. His handshake was firm, controlled. His hands were soft, in a way that told me he'd never swung a hammer in his life. I'm the wedding planner. This is my venue project. I looked past him at the barn. The roof sagged in the middle like a spine under too much weight. The siding had weathered to silver. Beautiful in that tragic way abandoned things are when you don't have to pay to fix them. 3 windows on the second floor were shattered, gaping holes that let weather and birds make themselves at home. Ivy had claimed the entire north wall, thick as a man's wrist in places. You want to hold a wedding here? I asked. I want to create a venue here, he corrected. And there was no humor in his voice, just certainty. There's a difference between holding an event and crafting an experience. I'd worked with enough wealthy clients during my contractor days to recognize the type. Ethan Cross had a vision, and he'd paid good money for the right to believe it was genius. Your email said you needed a structural assessment, I said. Timeline was tight. March 15th for completion. March 15th for final inspection, Ethan said, already walking toward the barn. The wedding is March 20th. The timeline is non-negotiable. Most timelines are negotiable when you find problems. Then we won't find problems. He stopped at the barn door and turned to face me. In the early light, I could see he was younger than I'd first thought. Mid-30s maybe, same as me. His eyes were the color of expensive whiskey, sharp and assessing. We'll find solutions. That's what I'm paying you for. I should have walked away. Should have told him that structural integrity doesn't negotiate, that wood rot and water damage don't care about wedding dates, that I wasn't in any state to handle a client with more money than sense, but my bank account had $217 in it. Mara's school was taking field trip deposits next week. And the way Ethan Cross looked at that barn, like he could see past the decay to something worth saving, made me want to prove I still could too. Let me see what we're working with, I said. Simpti. The interior was worse than I'd expected. Sunlight streamed through gaps in the roof, highlighting decades of neglect. The main floor was thick with dirt and dead leaves. Old farm equipment rusted in corners. The loft above groaned when wind hit the building. I pulled out my tape measure and started at the foundation, working my way up. Ethan followed, taking notes on an iPad, asking questions that were surprisingly informed for someone who looked like he'd never left a city in his life. "How bad?" he asked when I'd completed the first circuit. "Foundation's cracked in 3 places. Southwest corner has water intrusion, probably been ongoing for years. That's your stability issue right there." I pointed up. "Loft joists are compromised. See that sag? Wood rot. The whole second floor is questionable. Can you fix it?" "Depends on your budget." "The budget is $75,000. The timeline is 6 weeks. Can you work within those parameters?" I did the math in my head. 75,000 was generous for a barn restoration, even an aggressive one. 6 weeks was pushing it, but possible if I worked full days and nothing catastrophic turned up. "I'd need to see the full scope," I said. "What exactly are you building here?" Ethan's face shifted, the businessman facade dropping just enough to show something else underneath. Passion, maybe. Or desperation dressed up as confidence. "Come outside," he said. "I'll show you." We stood in the tall grass behind the barn. Ethan pulled up renderings on his iPad, swiping through images that transformed the wreck behind us into something out of a magazine. "The ceremony will be here," he said, gesturing toward a massive oak tree 50 yards out. "Simple arbor, white fabric, 200 guests. The reception moves into the barn." He showed me interior shots, Edison bulbs strung across exposed beams, farm tables dressed in linen, a bar built from reclaimed wood, a dessert station backlit with soft amber light. It was beautiful, ambitious, the kind of thing that would make Pinterest explode and brides weep. "The loft becomes the bridal suite," Ethan continued. "Private space for getting ready, for photos. I'm thinking floor-to-ceiling mirrors, a chandelier, maybe a vintage settee." He looked at me. "I need a staircase, something dramatic but safe. Wrought iron if possible, with oak treads. It needs to be a moment, you understand? When the bride descends those stairs, everyone needs to forget they're in a barn." I studied the renderings. He'd thought of everything. Traffic flow, lighting zones, even where the shadows would fall at golden hour. "You've done this before," I said. "I've planned 237 weddings," Ethan said. "But I've never built my own venue. I've always been at the mercy of hotels, golf clubs, estates that don't understand the vision. This is my chance to create something from nothing, to control every variable." "You can't control wood," I said, "or weather, or the fact that this building is trying to fall down. That's why I hired you." Ethan met my eyes. "Your portfolio showed commercial builds, residential renovations, even some historical restoration. You know structure. You know deadlines. And according to your references, you don't quit when things get complicated." My chest tightened. Those references were from 4 years ago, before the fire service, before Cascade, before I'd learned that some things you can't build your way out of. "I haven't done this kind of work in a while," I said carefully. "How long?" 4 months. "What were you doing before?" The question landed like a fist. I looked at the barn, at the oak tree, at anything but Ethan's assessing gaze. "Wildfire crew?" I said finally. "Hotshots. I worked the Western burn circuit for 8 years. And you stopped 4 months ago." "Yes." "Why?" I could have lied, could have said the pay was better in construction, that I'd missed civilian life, that I'd wanted to be closer to my daughter. But something about the way Ethan asked, direct and unflinching, made me give him the truth. "Because 3 of my crew didn't make it out of the Cascade fire," I said. "And I can't do that work anymore." The words sat between us like stones. Ethan didn't flinch. didn't offer condolences or platitudes. He just absorbed the information and nodded once. "Can you do this work?" he asked. I looked at my hands. They weren't shaking. "Yes," I said. "Then I'll see you Monday at 7. Ethan closed his iPad. "Bring your tools and your timeline. We have a venue to build." I spent the weekend drawing up plans and ordering materials. The work was familiar, comforting in the way muscle memory is. My hands knew how to sketch load-bearing structures, how to calculate board feet, how to build a cut list that wouldn't waste lumber. Mara sat at the kitchen table with me Saturday night, working on a geography project while I finalized the foundation repair strategy. "Is this the barn job?" she asked, leaning over to look at my drawings. "Yeah, baby, big one. Are you nervous?" I looked at her. 9 years old, with my dark hair and her mother's sharp eyes, too perceptive for her own good. "A little," I admitted. "Because of the fire? We didn't talk about Cascade much. Her therapist said I should let her lead those conversations, not force them. But she'd been there when I came home from the hospital, when the nightmares started, when I'd wake up gasping and stumble to her room just to make sure she was real and safe." "Yeah," I said, "because of the fire? But this is different, right? Barns don't burn the same way forests do." "No, they don't. And you're really good at building things. You built my treehouse, and it never fell down, even in that big storm." I pulled her into a hug, pressed my face into her hair. She smelled like kid shampoo and the vanilla candle she'd been burning while she worked. "You're right," I said. "This is different, and I'm going to be okay." "I know you are," she said with the absolute confidence only children possess. "You're my mom. You can do anything." I wished I believed that as completely as she did. Monday morning arrived, with frost on the grass and a sky so clear it hurt to look at. I loaded my truck with tools, double-checked my supplies, and drove to the barn with my heart beating harder than the job warranted. Ethan's Audi was already there. I parked and climbed out, expecting to find him waiting by his car. Instead, I heard noise from inside the barn, the scrape of metal on concrete, the thud of something heavy hitting the ground. I pushed through the door and stopped. Ethan had cleared the entire center of the barn floor. Old equipment pushed to the walls, debris swept into piles, years of accumulated junk organized into categories. He'd set up a folding table near the entrance, and on it sat a scale model of the barn made from balsa wood, complete with tiny stairs, tiny tables, tiny Edison bulbs suspended from thread. He wore jeans today, still expensive, still too clean, but at least practical. His shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows. There was dust in his hair. "You're early," I said. "I'm always early." He didn't look up from the model. He was adjusting something on the loft level, his movements precise and careful. "I thought you might want to see the three-dimensional scope before you started demo." "I'm not demoing, I'm restoring." "Semantics." He straightened and gestured at the model. "Come look." I set down my tool bag and walked over. Up close, the model was even more impressive. He'd included every beam, every window, even the crack in the foundation rendered in careful pencil lines. "The loft will be here," Ethan said, pointing with a thin wooden dowel. "Bridal suite, like I said. We'll need that staircase positioned for optimal sight lines from the entrance. The bar goes here, dessert station there, DJ booth in this corner where the acoustics are best." He moved the dowel to trace the guest flow. Ceremony at 4. Cocktail hour at 5 while we flip the barn. Reception at 6. 200 guests. Seated dinner. Dancing until midnight. "You've planned this down to the minute," I said. "Down to the second," he corrected. "I don't leave things to chance." "What about the couple? Do they get a say?" "Of course. Rebecca and Tom have been involved in every decision." His expression softened slightly. They're wonderful. Mid-30s, second marriage for both. Rebecca's father is officiating. Tom's 8-year-old daughter is the flower girl. They want something intimate, meaningful. A celebration that feels earned, not performed. The way he said it made me look at him closer. There was something personal in his voice, something that wasn't just professional pride. You care about this one, I said. I care about all my weddings, but this one's different. Ethan's jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he'd shut down, retreat behind that polished facade. Instead, he picked up a tiny balsa chair from the model and turned it over in his fingers. This is my first independent venue, he said quietly. I've been planning weddings for 10 years, working for firms, building other people's brands. This is mine. If it fails, it won't fail, I said. He looked at me. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise the structure won't fail. That's my part. The rest is yours. Something shifted in his expression. The tightness eased. He set the tiny chair back in its place. Then we'd better get to work, he said. We fell into a rhythm over the first week. I worked mornings, tackling the foundation first, because nothing else mattered if the building wasn't stable. I dug out the cracked sections, poured new footers, reinforced the corners with rebar and concrete that would outlast the original structure by decades. Ethan arrived at noon every day like clockwork. He'd bring lunch in glass containers, elaborate salads and grain bowls and cold-pressed juices that probably cost more than my breakfast, lunch, and dinner combined. You don't have to feed me, I said the first time. I'm not feeding you, he replied, setting 2 forks on the tailgate of my truck where I'd spread out my drawings. I'm feeding myself. You're just here. But he always brought 2 of everything. 2 forks, 2 napkins, 2 bottles of sparkling water with lime. We ate in comfortable silence most days. I'd answer his questions about the work, explain why I was sistering joists instead of replacing them entirely, walk him through the load calculations for the new staircase. He'd show me fabric swatches and furniture catalogs, asking my opinion on table heights and whether oak or walnut would photograph better. You know I'm a carpenter, not a designer, I said once. You have spatial sense, he countered, and you see structure where I see aesthetic. That's valuable. By the end of week 1, the foundation was solid and I'd started framing out the loft reinforcements. The work felt good. My hands remembered what to do. The saw didn't scare me. The smell of fresh-cut lumber was clean and honest, nothing like smoke. I was measuring joists Friday afternoon when I heard footsteps on the loft ladder. Ethan climbed up, moving carefully, and stood at the edge of the new framing. Looks solid, he said. It is. This'll hold 300 pounds per square foot when I'm done. Good. He walked the perimeter, running his hand along the new beams. I've been thinking about the bridal suite setup. I want to bring in that settee I showed you and maybe a full-length mirror, but I'm worried about weight distribution. Smart. Some of these old barns, the lofts were never designed for furniture. But we're overbuilding this. You could put a piano up here if you wanted. Ethan smiled. I'll stick with the settee. He crouched to examine the joint work, and I noticed the way he moved. Deliberate and controlled. Everything about Ethan Cross was controlled. His clothes, his schedule, his facial expressions. Like he'd decided early on that chaos was the enemy and order was the only defense. I recognized it because I'd been doing the same thing since Cascade. Controlling what I could because so much had spun out of control. Can I ask you something? Ethan said, still examining the joists. Depends on the question. Why carpentry? If you were a wildfire firefighter for 8 years, that's not exactly a casual career. That's a calling. So why walk away to build barns? My hands stilled on the tape measure. I'd known this question would come eventually, surprised it had taken this long. I didn't walk away, I said. I ran. Ethan looked up. I sat back on my heels, the tape measure loose in my hands. The Cascade fire happened last June. We'd been on it for 2 weeks. Good containment, everything by the book. Then the wind shifted. 40-mile-an-hour gusts out of nowhere pushed the fire right over our line. We deployed shelters and... My throat closed. I couldn't say the rest. Ethan moved closer, sat on the new framing beside me. He didn't touch me, didn't crowd. Just sat close enough that I wasn't alone. 3 of my crew died, I managed finally. Jessie, Marcus, and Derek. Jessie had a wife and 2 kids. Marcus was supposed to get married in September. Derek was 23 years old. And you survived. I survived. That's not your fault. Everyone says that. I looked at him. But I was crew lead. I made the call to hold the line instead of retreating early. I read the weather wrong, or the weather was unpredictable. In wildfire, everything's unpredictable. That's why you plan for worst case. I didn't, and they died. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "My younger brother died in a car accident when I was 16. He was 14. I was supposed to drive him to soccer practice, but I had a date. Told him to get Mom to take him. She was tired, fell asleep at the wheel. They hit a tree, she lived. He didn't. I stared at him. He was looking at the barn floor, jaw tight. For years I played the game," Ethan continued. "If I'd driven him, if I'd canceled the date, if I'd insisted Mom was too tired. But the truth is, there are 1,000 variables in any tragedy, and you can't control them all. You can only control what you do next." And what did you do next? I became obsessed with control. He gave a humorless laugh. Started planning everything. Schedules, contingencies, backup plans for the backup plans. Drove my parents crazy. Drove myself crazy. But it was the only way I knew how to survive. Did it work? I'm here, aren't I? He looked at me. And so are you. You survived, Hayes. Now you get to decide what to do with that. Something in my chest loosened, not healed but less tight. I'm trying, I said. I know. He stood, offered me his hand. Come on, let's take a break. I brought cookies. You brought cookies. Salted chocolate chip from that bakery in town. They're exceptional. I took his hand and let him pull me up. His grip was steady. Why? Week 2 brought rain that turned the access road into a mud trap. I started arriving earlier to beat the worst of it, and Ethan started staying later. Some nights we worked until full dark. Me finishing trim by work light. Him arranging furniture he'd sourced from estate sales and antique barns across 3 counties. The barn was transforming. You could see it now, the bones of something beautiful emerging from the decay. The loft was solid. The new staircase was half built. Wrought iron balusters waiting for oak treads. The main floor had been cleared and leveled, ready for the next phase. Thursday night, I was installing support brackets for the chandelier Ethan had found. Some massive antique thing with crystal drops that would catch light like trapped stars. Ethan was on a ladder across the barn, hanging a level line to mark where the Edison bulbs would run. "How's Mara?" he asked. I glanced over. We'd talked about our lives in fragments over lunches. He knew I had a daughter, that I was divorced, that I rented a cottage on the edge of town that needed more work than I had energy for. "She's good, Stutz," I said. "Science fair project is due next week. She's building a model of tectonic plates with clay and cardboard." "Is she nervous?" "Excited. She doesn't get nervous like normal kids. She just goes all in." "She sounds like you." I tightened the bracket bolt. "I get nervous plenty, but you go all in anyway." He wasn't wrong. For better or worse, I'd never learned how to do anything halfway. It was what made me good at firefighting. And it was what made Cascade hurt so much. What about you? I asked. Family? Parents are retired in Arizona. I see them twice a year, Christmas and Mom's birthday. My sister lives in Boston with her husband and 3 kids. We're close, but not geographically. No partner? No. The word was flat, final. I'd hit something. Sorry, I said. Didn't mean to pry. You're not. Ethan climbed down from the ladder, adjusted it 2 feet left, climbed back up. I don't date. Haven't in years. It's easier. Easier than what? Than trying. He marked the wall with a pencil, neat and precise. I'm good at my job because I control variables. Relationships are nothing but uncontrolled variables. People change, feelings fade, things fall apart. That's pretty bleak. It's realistic. He climbed down again, moved the ladder. I watched my parents almost destroy each other after my brother died. Saw my sister go through a divorce that left her broke and broken. I planned hundreds of weddings, and I can tell you which marriages will last based on how they handle stress during planning. Most won't. Love isn't enough. It never is. I set down my drill and turned to face him. Then why do you do this? Plan weddings. Build this venue. If you don't believe in it, I believe in the ritual, he said. The celebration, the commitment, the intention. I believe people deserve a beautiful moment, even if the future is uncertain. And I'm good at creating beautiful moments, but not living them. No, he met my eyes. Not living them. The barn felt very quiet. Rain drummed on the new roof. The work lights cast shadows that made everything feel closer. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard, I said softly. Ethan's expression flickered. Maybe. But it keeps me from getting hurt. It also keeps you from everything else. He didn't have an answer for that. He just picked up his level and went back to work. I wanted to say more. Wanted to tell him that control was an illusion, that fear dressed as practicality was still fear, that the best things in my life had been unplanned and messy. But I was the one who'd run from fire, who couldn't light a candle without my hands shaking, who'd chosen carpentry over passion because hammers didn't ask you to be brave. So I picked up my drill and went back to work too. Week 3 was when everything almost fell apart. I was in the loft installing the final floor sections, working alone because Ethan had a site visit with Rebecca and Tom. The board I was standing on had tested solid that morning. I'd jumped on it, put my full weight on it, checked for flex. But old wood is treacherous. Sometimes the rot hides deep where you can't see it. The board cracked like a gunshot. My right boot punched through. I fell forward, caught the beam with both arms, splinters driving into my forearms like needles of fire. My leg dangled through the hole. Nothing but 15 feet of air between me and the concrete below. My heart slammed. Adrenaline flooded my system. For a second, I was back in the Cascade fire, the heat crushing down, the shelter fabric melting, the sound of my crew screaming. Hayes! Ethan's voice cut through the panic. I gasped air, focused. I was in the barn. I was caught on a beam. I was not in the fire. Hayes, hold on! I heard him running. The loft ladder rattled as he climbed. Then his hands were on me, gripping my shoulders, helping me pull my leg free. We scrambled back onto solid framing, and I sat there shaking, breathing too hard, my forearms bleeding. Are you hurt? Ethan demanded. His face was white. His hands moved over my arms, checking the damage. Talk to me. Are you hurt? I'm fine, I managed. Just cuts. Just cuts. Jesus Christ, Hayes, you could have. He stopped. His hands were shaking worse than mine. I'm okay, I said, steadier now. Ethan, I'm okay. He sat back on his heels, staring at the hole in the floor like it was a wound. You could have fallen through, but I didn't. You could have fallen through. His voice cracked. You could have. I reached out and grabbed his hand. His fingers were ice cold despite the work heat. I didn't fall, I said firmly. I'm here. I'm fine. He looked at my hand, holding his, then at my face. His eyes were too bright. I can't. He pulled his hand away, stood abruptly. I need to call someone, a structural engineer. We need a second opinion on the loft integrity. Ethan, this is my fault. I pushed too hard on the timeline. I should have insisted on more comprehensive testing. He was spiraling, control slipping. We need to reassess the whole second floor. Maybe reinforce every joist. Maybe. Ethan! I stood, moved in front of him. Stop. I can't stop. This is my project. My responsibility. If something happens to you because nothing happened to me. But it could have. The words echoed in the barn. Ethan's chest heaved. His carefully maintained control was gone, stripped away by fear. And I understood then. This wasn't about the barn. Your brother, I said quietly. His face crumpled, just for a second, just enough to show the wound underneath. Then he locked it down, jaw tight, eyes hard. I need to make some calls, he said, and turned away. I let him go, watched him climb down the ladder and stride out of the barn like something was chasing him. Then I sat down on the solid framing and stared at the hole I'd made. My forearms throbbed. Blood dripped onto the new wood floor. And I thought about how easy it was to fall through rotten places you thought were solid. Ethan didn't come back that day, or the next. I worked alone, reinforcing every inch of the loft floor, replacing boards that even looked questionable. I over-engineered everything to the point of paranoia. If Ethan was going to pull the plug on the project, it wouldn't be because the structure was unsafe. Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed, a text from Ethan. Can we talk? Tonight, my place? I almost said no. The smart thing was to let him cancel the contract, take my partial payment, walk away. This job had gotten complicated in ways that had nothing to do with carpentry, but I thought about his hands shaking, about the way he'd checked my arms for damage before he'd let himself fall apart, about cookies and lunch in glass containers and the way he'd listened when I told him about Cascade without trying to fix it. Send me the address, I typed back. Ethan lived in a renovated loft downtown, all exposed brick and industrial fixtures and furniture that looked like it cost more than my truck. Everything was precisely arranged. Clean lines, no clutter. The home of someone who'd eliminated chaos by force. He opened the door in jeans and a soft gray sweater, barefoot, hair slightly messed, like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked younger, more vulnerable. Come in, he said. I followed him to the kitchen. He had wine already open, 2 glasses poured. I owe you an apology, Ethan said without preamble. I left you alone at the job site after an accident. That was unprofessional. You were upset. That's not an excuse. He handed me a glass. I've been thinking about what you said. About my brother. You're right. I've spent 20 years trying to control everything so I never have to feel that helpless again. And it's made me... He stopped. It's made me very good at my job. And very alone in my life. I sipped the wine. It was good, complex, probably expensive. I understand that. Do you? Yeah. I ran away from fire because I couldn't control it. Took up carpentry because wood is predictable. Built walls around my life because walls can't burn down. I set the glass on the counter. We're not that different, Ethan. But you're trying. You took this job even though it scared you. You're building something. So are you. Am I? He looked around his perfect loft. Or am I just creating another controlled environment? The barn, I said. You're building something real, something that matters. With you. The words hung between us, not a question, a statement. With me, I agreed. Ethan moved closer, not crowding, just closing distance. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. The uncontrolled variable part, the letting someone in part. Neither do I. But you're here. So are you. He lifted his hand slowly, giving me time to move away. When I didn't, he cupped my jaw, thumb brushing my cheekbone. His touch was careful, asking permission. Hayes, he said, just my name. A question and an answer. I leaned in and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative. Two people who'd forgotten how to trust testing the foundation. Then his hand slid into my hair and my hand found his waist, and the kiss deepened into something honest and hungry. When we pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against mine. I'm terrified, he whispered. Me too. What do we do? Show up, I said. Stay consistent. Don't lie. He laughed softly, using my own advice. It's good advice. He kissed me again. Slower this time. We had 6 more days until the venue deadline. 6 days until Rebecca and Tom's wedding. 6 days to finish building something that would hold. The barn wasn't the only thing we were trying to save. The final week was a sprint. We worked side by side from dawn until midnight every day. I finished the staircase, installed the chandelier, sealed the roof. Ethan dressed the space with fabric and flowers and light that turned the barn into something that looked like it had grown from dreams instead of decay. We didn't talk about the kiss, didn't define what was happening between us. We just worked in the comfortable silence of people who'd learned each other's rhythms. Wednesday night, I was doing final trim when I smelled it. Smoke? My body reacted before my brain. I dropped the hammer. Vision tunneled. Hands went numb. The barn disappeared and I was back in Cascade, the world on fire, the heat turning air into a weapon. Hayes! I couldn't breathe, couldn't see. The smoke was everywhere. Hayes, look at me. Hands on my face. Ethan's voice cutting through the panic. There's no fire, he said firmly. Hayes, look at me. There's no fire. I focused on his face, his eyes. The barn came back into view. Outside, I gasped. He led me out. In the twilight, I saw the small fire pit he'd set up for testing. Flames controlled and low, for the wedding ambiance. Just a fire pit, not Cascade, not dangerous. But my body didn't know that. I sat hard on the ground, shaking, trying to breathe. Ethan doused the fire immediately. Water hissed on coals. Then he sat beside me, close enough to touch but not touching, giving me space to come back. After a long time, my breathing steadied. I didn't know you were testing that tonight, I said. I should have warned you. His voice was tight with something that sounded like guilt. Hayes, I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking. Not your fault. Yes, it is. I know about Cascade. I should have realized, you can't walk on eggshells around me forever. I can be considerate. I looked at him. No fire at the wedding. I can't. I won't be able to handle it. Then there won't be fire, Ethan said immediately. We'll use LED candles. Glass hurricanes with battery lights. It'll be beautiful without flame. It's your signature element. You're more important than my signature. The words hit me in the chest. I turned to face him fully. Ethan, I mean it. His jaw was set. I spent 20 years building a life where nothing could touch me. It was safe. It was lonely. Then you showed up with your tool belt and your trauma and your daughter who believes you can do anything. He reached out, took my hand. You're the first uncontrolled variable I've ever wanted to keep. I'm a mess. So am I. I have panic attacks. I have control issues. I might never be able to be around open flame again. Then we'll build a life without fire, he said simply. Hayes, I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking if you want to try this, whatever this is, with me. My heart was hammering. Not panic this time. Something else. Something that felt like the moment before you step off solid ground and trust the structure will hold. Yeah, I said, I want to try. He smiled and it reached his eyes, real and unguarded. Then he kissed me under the oak tree where Rebecca and Tom would make their promises in 3 days. And I thought maybe promises weren't about controlling the future. Maybe they were about choosing to show up for it anyway. March 20th dawned clear and cold and perfect. I arrived at the barn before sunrise to do final checks. Every beam solid, every board level, every light tested. The structure would hold. Ethan arrived at 7 with controlled panic written across his face. "Florist is running late," he said without preamble. "String quartet hit traffic. Rebecca's dress needs steaming and I can't find the backup steamer." "Breathe," I said. He shot me a look. "Don't use my own advice against me." I grinned. "Go handle the dress, I'll call the florist." By noon, the barn was ready. White roses climbed the new staircase. Edison bulbs glowed warm against the beams. Tables dressed in linen surrounded a dance floor that gleamed. The oak tree outside wore an arbor draped in fabric that moved like water in the breeze. It was perfect. We'd built something perfect. Guests arrived at 3:30. At 4, the string quartet started playing. I stood at the back of the crowd, watching Ethan in his charcoal suit, adjusting final details that didn't need adjusting. Rebecca walked down the aisle on her father's arm, and Tom's face when he saw her was everything a wedding should be. The flower girl threw petals with chaotic joy. When they said their vows under the oak tree, Rebecca's father's voice cracked, and Tom wiped tears from his face. The barn erupted in applause. I found Ethan by the dessert table after the ceremony, straightening a cake topper that was already straight. "It's perfect," I said. "The cake is slightly tilted." "Ethan," he looked at me. His tie was loosened, hair slightly mussed. He looked human and beautiful. "It's perfect," I said again. His shoulders dropped. "We did it. You did it. I just made sure it didn't fall down." "Hayes." His voice went soft. "You made sure I didn't fall down." Before I could respond, the DJ called for the first dance. Rebecca and Tom moved to the center of the floor, wrapped in each other, swaying to something slow and sweet. "Dance with me," Ethan said. "I don't dance." "Neither do I." He held out his hand. "We'll figure it out." I took his hand and let him lead me to the edge of the floor where the light was softer. His hand settled at my waist, warm and steady. Mine rested on his shoulder. We moved without rhythm, clumsy and honest. "I'm scared," I admitted quietly. "Of what?" "That this is temporary. That I'll wake up and the fear will be back and I won't be able to." "Hayes." He stopped moving. His hand came up to cup my face. "You're not temporary. You're the most solid thing I've ever known." I kissed him there on the dance floor, surrounded by strangers celebrating love. He kissed back, slow and sure, like a promise made in good faith. When we pulled apart, he was smiling. "Logistics," I said. "Magic," he corrected. "Both," I said. And in that barn we'd built together, surrounded by light and music and people who believed in second chances, I finally believed I might get one too. We often think healing means erasing the scars. But real healing is learning to build around them, to create something strong enough to hold the weight of what we've survived. Love isn't finding someone who makes you forget your fear. It's finding someone who stands beside you while you remember and chooses to stay anyway. The barn still stands, so do we.